Who's friends with all the night dreamers, talking to you at night. Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not inside. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair. If you want to talk conspiracies, Night Dreamers is for you. Top secret case, alien space, it's Gary with the news. Tune in on the radio, don't let Big Brother know. They're listening to everything, even Gary's late night show. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Show Dreamers talk show will fix your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
Well, it is May the 2nd, and I tell you, time is going by so fast. Earth changes. It's really going on. I tell you, here down in the Puget Sound in Washington State, the weather has been so strange. Last week we broke 80s. Today is in the 70s. Tomorrow it's going to be back down in the 50s. It's going to be raining the rest of the week. But I got out today. I got some beautiful pictures down in the Puget Sound area of the water and all that. I hope everybody's having a good one. Tonight we got two great guests. Our first guest is going to be Captain Paul Watson. You might remember him from Wales War and all that. And I'll tell you what, it's going to be a great interview. Our second guest, we're going to be talking about Roswell. Did it actually happen? Was it a weather balloon? Was it something else? So stay tuned. We're going to be right back right after, well, the strange guy. That's our news director, Guy Ticker, with the news.
Now, the latest news from the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network newsroom. I'm Guy Ticker. Life as we know it could exist on Venus, a new experiment reveals. Despite being Earth's twin, Venus sizzles at temperatures reaching hundreds of degrees and is blanketed by clouds made of corrosive sulfuric acid, a colorless, carcinogenic liquid that dissolves metals, erodes our teeth, and irritates our eyes, noses, and throats. Not very friendly. As such, the rocky planet isn't considered to be much of a habitat for living organisms. It's definitely not as welcoming as Mars, Jupiter's icy moon Europa, or Saturn's Enceladus. However, scientists suspect that life that might have emerged in Venus's hellish environment could be found wafting in its noxious clouds, which are cooler than the planet's surface, and thus could support some kinds of extreme life forms. Along those lines, a new lab experiment conducted by researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, found that 19 amino acids surprisingly persisted for at least 1 month in a sulfuric acid solution that included some water. Just like Venus. I'm Guy Ticker. The news is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. To submit a story or to get all the latest news, go to nightdreamstalkradio.com. The truth is out there.
You're listening to my friend Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
Captain Paul Watson is a marine wildlife conservation and environmental activist. Watson was one of the founding members and directors of Greenpeace. In 1977, he left Greenpeace and founded the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. A renowned speaker, accomplished author, master mariner, and lifelong environmentalist, Captain Watson has been awarded many honors for his dedication to the oceans and to the planet. Among many commendations for his work, he received the Genesis Award for Lifetime Achievement in 1998, was named as one of the top 20 environmental heroes of the 20th century by Time magazine in 2000, and was inducted into the U.S. Animal Rights Hall of Fame in Washington, D.C. in 2002. He was also awarded the Amazon Peace Prize by the President of Ecuador in 2007. In 2012, Captain Watson became only the second person after Captain Jacques Cousteau to be awarded the Jules Verne Award, dedicated to environmentalists and adventurers. Today, Captain Paul Watson continues his fight for marine wildlife conservation with the new Captain Paul Watson Foundation.
Well, Paul, I want to thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's been a while since you've been on. How are you doing?
Oh, good. My pleasure to be here.
Well, what is going on?
Right now, we're getting ready to launch a campaign to return to Iceland to stop their illegal whaling activities. This man named Christian Lofson, who is probably he's obsessed with killing whales, and he wants to kill up to 200 endangered fin whales this summer, and we intend to stop him.
And how has it been in the past when you try to stop this gentleman?
Last summer, the day we arrived in Icelandic waters, the Icelandic government put a temporary ban on his whaling, and so that was quite successful. But now he's vowed to actually take down the government if he can't get his way, and he does have the influence and the power to do it. He's the wealthiest man in Iceland, and he's already forced the removal of the Minister of Fisheries. So he's saying he's going to get his permit, and we're saying that he's not going to be able to use it.
What is this purpose with this gentleman? I mean, he knows that, by the slaughter of this, it's just going to cause so much chaos for our oceans. Well, I mean, this guy repeatedly knows this, and he keeps doing it. Why?
Well, the majority of people in Iceland are actually opposed to what he's doing, but he's obsessed with killing whales. He's 80 years old, and he's been doing this all his life. And in fact, he doesn't make any money. He loses between $1 million and $2 million a year doing his whaling operations. His money comes from fisheries. He owns, he's probably the largest fishing company in Iceland. But he just seems to take a lot of enjoyment from doing it. And, he goes to the International Whaling Commission meetings and brags about, killing whales. And he's saying that he intends to continue doing it for as long as he's alive. So it's, he's a sort of a modern day Captain Ahab, just obsessed with killing whales.
I wonder if something in his childhood has caused this, to be obsessed with the slaughter.
Oh, he was recruited by his father into the whaling industry when he was 14 years old. So he's been doing this since the 50s, and he's just obsessed.
Now, I hear you have a new ship. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, in April, we actually secured our second ship, an incredible vessel. It was a former Japanese patrol boat, and it was owned by the Japanese government. Now, they're certainly not going to be selling a ship to me. So what we did was we set up a covert company in the U.S., which was then owned by a company we set up in Korea, and then we bought the ship. And a Japanese crew actually delivered it to us in Korea, and then we took it from there. And last week we delivered the vessel to Tasmania in Australia, and we're getting prepared to go after the Japanese fleet once again, because they intend to return to the Southern Ocean to kill whales. And they've just completed the construction of this new factory ship, this incredible $100 million vessel. And the only purpose for that is to go to the Southern Ocean. So in just yesterday's The Guardian, they exposed the fact that that's what they're going to do. I've been saying for months and months now that that's what they're doing, but everybody says, well, you have no evidence of it. But as of yesterday's article in The Guardian, it shows that that's exactly what they're intending to do.
And as you were mentioning before we went on the air, they're not even going to try to disguise it this time by saying research or anything.
No, the International Court of Justice ruled against them in 2014, and that stopped them for a year, and then they just went back. They did stop in 2019 because they're no longer in the International Whaling Commission, but they just say, we're just going to do that. And the problem is the International Court of Justice has no enforcement powers. In fact, there's no enforcement agency anywhere in the world willing to stop them. I mean, there's a complete lack of economic and political motivation to do anything about these, not only illegal whaling, but illegal fishing.
The whole point is, how much longer can this go on before, we are going to see major decline of the fish population, the whale population, and sea life in general?
Well, we're already, there's no sustainable fisheries anywhere in the world, and the whole industry is based on short-term investment for short-term gain, with no long-ranging plans at all as to what the impact of this is going to be. According to marine biologists and fisheries experts like Dr. Boris Worm or Dr. Daniel Pauly, that the fishing industry is going to collapse by 2048 or 2058. And I think it's going to be sooner than that, because there simply won't be any fish. You see right now, you go into the fish markets or a restaurant, and the fish is there, but it takes an incredible amount of money to go after the fewer and fewer fish. So there's a huge investment in technology, satellite tracking systems, super trawlers, gill nets that are 100 miles long, long lines 100 miles long. In 2015, we intercepted a toothfish poacher down in the Southern Ocean. Toothfish it's marketed as Chilean sea bass. It's not from Chile, and it's not a bass. But that one ship, when we began to chase it, dropped its net, and our other ship began to pick that net up. It was set 2 kilometers deep. It took 200 hours to pull that net up, and it was 72 kilometers long and weighed 70 tons, one net from one ship. And, there's enough net and long lines and gill nets set every day to go around this planet 60 times.
That is really crazy. It's taking that much to be able to catch the fish that they could do 20, 30 years ago with a way smaller net.
Yeah, and they're not fishing anymore just to feed people. About 40% of all the fish that's being taken from the ocean is being fed to domestic animals, to pigs, to chickens, to salmon on salmon farms. I mean, we live in a world right now where chickens are eating more fish than all the world's puffins and albatrosses and penguins put together. And because, these factory farms, they need a protein paste. And that protein paste comes from fish meal. The other thing they're doing now is moving into exploiting krill populations in the Southern Ocean. These are these tiny shrimp-like creatures, primary food of penguins and whales. And that's all being converted into this protein paste, again, for feeding to domestic animals. In December, we were up in the English Channel and off the coast of Ireland, documenting the super trawlers. These are these giant ships which set nets, and every net they bring in, and we watch them bring it in one after another. Each net can bring in enough fish to fill 3 school buses, for example. And all these fish are being brought in. They're actually crushed into the net. I mean, they're not something you'd find in a fish market, because it's all rendered into fish meal and then fed to domestic animals. But what they're taking out of the ocean are blue whiting and herring and all these things, and they're this is the food fish for everything else in the ocean. So they're literally pulling the food out of the mouths of seals, whales, and other fish. Again, 2 years ago, we stumbled across a super trawler off the coast of France, and it had dumped 150,000 blue whiting, and we, filmed it, all these carcasses floating on the ocean and everything. The reason they did that is they didn't particularly want to target that particular species. They wanted something else, so they just dumped everything in their net, and of course it was all dead. So the wastage is incredible. For every say kilo of shrimp that's caught, about 22 kilos of something else is destroyed.
And what other type of species of fish, life or sea life, end up in those nets?
Everything that gets in their way, including orcas are being caught up in the super trawlers up in the Bering Sea. Orcas are being caught in the nets and killed. Incredible numbers of dolphins. The French trawler fleet alone kills about 8,000 dolphins every year, or has been. We actually got a success on that. We got the French government to put a moratorium on the French trawler fleets to protect the dolphins, and that was after quite a few years of opposition. And that was a hard struggle, because we had to get people in France to understand what was going on, because the average person in France didn't even know there were dolphins off the coast of France. But the bodies were washing up on the beaches. So what we did was we took the bodies and put them in front of the Eiffel Tower, on the steps of the National Assembly, on the steps of the European Parliament, to get everybody's attention, and that worked.
What type of attention did you...
We said, go ahead.
And the fish, the fisheries, the fishermen are selling their boats like mad, all the way from Washington, all the way up to Oregon, California. They're not making a living like they did 20, 30 years ago. So that at this point, a lot of them saying, I can't do this anymore. And they're trying to dump their boats.
There's no place in the fishing industry anymore for the small boats, for the small fishermen. It's all been replaced by large trawlers and mechanized industrial operations, which are owned and operated by huge multinational conglomerates. Mitsubishi, for example. I mean, the entire fishing industry of British Columbia is controlled by one man, Jimmy Pattison. He started out as a used car salesman. Now he controls the entire British Columbia fishing industry. And to them, it's just a short-term investment for short-term gain. They have no real interest in protecting fish populations. In fact, I call it the economics of extinction. There's money to be made by driving species of fish and other animals to extinction. And why that is that as the fish populations are diminished, the value of the fish goes up. So the fewer fish, the more expensive it becomes in the market. And that's why fish prices today are incredible. I was raised in a fishing village in eastern Canada. When I look at the fish prices today in markets and restaurants, it's just, unbelievable. I was raised in a lobster fishing town where, lobsters were so cheap that they actually used to catch them in eastern Canada to fertilize the potato fields. It used to be called the poor man's meat because there was so much of it. And now you can see how expensive it is.
Well, my kids love fish and chips. And, I haven't ate fish other than yesterday for over 20 some years. I just not a fish eater. But, they're not kids anymore. They're all adults, but they love fish and chips. And I remember back a few years ago, you could go get fish and chips really inexpensive. Now, yesterday, they surprised me. They came home and said, hey, Dad, here's halibut, fish and chips, 2 small pieces of halibut, some French fries. It was like almost $26, $27.
It used to be like fish and chips was haddock or cod or or halibut. But most fish and chips today is shark. So that's the cheapest fish they can get. And it's still pretty expensive.
You said shark?
Yeah, most fish and chips is actually shark.
How many people know that?
Probably not many, but in the UK and Australia, we've been exposing this for many years. That because they're big on fish and chips in the UK and Australia, and an investigation into the fish and chip industry found out most of it is shark.
Too, again, there's a slaughter going on with sharks too.
Yeah, about 90 million sharks are killed every year. They're considered the great monsters of the ocean, but we kill 90 million of them. The average number of people killed by sharks every year is 5, which is amazing considering hundreds of millions of people go into the ocean almost every single day. I mean, it's more dangerous to play golf than to go into the ocean swimming or surfing because more people die every year on golf courses from lightning strikes or bee stings than people are killed by sharks.
Or heart attacks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting too. But, if we kill off the sharks, we're killing off everything in the ocean. And, that is where I'm concerned. You're talking about 2035 or something like that. I got a feeling it's even going to be sooner than that because, the average person, that back, when I was young and married, at the start of my marriage, we'd go in the store. The cheapest meat was fish. Now yes. It's one of the most expensive pieces of flesh you can buy.
Yeah, the fishing industry is collapsing. And as I've been saying for years, when the ocean dies, we all die. We don't live on a planet with a dead ocean. Probably the most shocking thing is that since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton in the sea. These are the small aquatic plants, and they provide up to 70% of the oxygen in the air we breathe. 40% diminishment since 1950. And why is this happening? Because of the diminishment of whales and dolphins, seabirds, and fishes. Those species provide the nutrient base for the phytoplankton primarily through feces, which provides magnesium, iron, and nitrogen. And when you diminish fish populations, whale populations, you diminish phytoplankton populations. And we don't live on a planet without phytoplankton. When phytoplankton disappears from the sea, we die. It's as simple as that. It is the foundation of life on this planet. It not only does it provide oxygen, but it also feeds everything above it in the ocean too, from to the krill to the fish and onwards and upwards. Whales, in fact, we refer to them as the farmers of the ocean because their crop is phytoplankton, and they every day, for instance, one blue whale will dump 3 tons of feces or manure onto the surface of the sea, which is then providing the nutrient base for the phytoplankton.
Well, too, I was reading an article, Paul, here just recently. They're saying that the oceans in the next 100 years at this rate are going to die.
Yeah. That's why it's looking at if the ocean dies, we die, and it's as simple as that. And I have seen, I'm 73 right now, and I was raised in a fishing village in eastern Canada. I have seen that diminishment with my own eyes, not only the diminishment of the fishing industry, but also the diminishment of so many species. And the problem with humans is that we have this incredible ability to adapt to diminishment. As things become diminished, we just accept it and move on. Wipe out one species, move on to another species. I mean, pollock, for example, for back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, nobody fished pollock. It has no taste. And so their populations of pollock were pretty healthy. And then somebody discovered that pollock, all you have to do is take the white meat from the pollock and put a chemical smell on it to make it smell like crab, put a white chemical strip on it and sell it as surima or fake crab. And then all of a sudden, there's a pollock industry. And you go into Seattle, for instance, you order a crab salad. It's not crab. It's pollock with a chemical dye and a chemical a smell to it.
Oh boy, I tell you, that's really alarming too when you think about it. But you say people adapt to it. You can only adapt to something so long, and then you can't do it anymore. The population will start decreasing because let's face it, the ocean dies, like you say, we die, not just because of lack of being able to breathe. It's going to affect us in so many different ways. The whole climate change, everything, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're doomed.
Yeah, I like to put it this way. If you look at the planet as a spaceship, which is what we are, we're this incredible spaceship on a voyage around the Milky Way, and every spaceship has a life support system, and that life support system provides us with the air we breathe and regulates climate and temperature and provides us with the food we eat. And that life support system is it's maintained by a crew of engineers. These engineers keep everything running. We humans, we're not engineers, we're passengers. We're having a wonderful time amusing ourselves on Spaceship Earth. But what we're doing is we're killing off the engineers or murdering the engineers every day in every way. And there's only so many engineers you can kill before the machinery begins to fall apart. And we don't live on a planet without bees and worms and trees and fish. And if they go, we go with it. There are 3 basic laws of ecology. First is the law of diversity. The strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon diversity of species within it. The second is the law of interdependence. All those species within an ecosystem are interdependent with each other. And the third is the law of finite resources, that there's a limit to growth and a limit to carrying capacity. And when you take the carrying capacity from other species, it causes diminishment in diversity and interdependence, and that leads to ecological collapse.
Very well put, too. No, one thing, pirates have really been increasing because they can't make a living anymore. Going back generations and generations of being fishermen, they can't make a living fishing anymore. So now they're out extorting.
We hear about the pirates of Somalia, but they're really just impoverished fishermen who, the real pirates of Somalia were the European and Asian trawling fleets that came in and just took everything out of their waters and drove these people into desperation. Now we're seeing the emergence of piracy off the waters of Mauritania and in the Gulf of Guinea. Again, places where European and Asian trawlers are just devastating populations. So the entire world, we're seeing fleets of, Russian or Spanish or Japanese or Chinese fleets that are just pulling everything they can without any regard to conservation.
And what is your plan to stop it? I mean, coming up here, you got the Japanese. They have a new super, a ship. I mean, what is your plans to try to stop the slaughter of, killing of the whales?
Well, many years ago, I developed a strategy which I call aggressive nonviolence, which means we're going to aggressively intervene, to harass, to blockade, but without causing any injury. And we've never caused any injury to anybody. But we were successful in stopping whaling operations in the Southern Ocean, in the North Atlantic, and we did that by blocking and stopping those ships. And yes, we sank a few whaling ships too, but nobody was on them when we sank them. An example: in 1986, we sank half of Iceland's whaling fleet in Reykjavik Harbor. 2 of their 4 ships went to the bottom, destroyed their whale processing plant. Now that sounds like it's illegal, but I flew to Iceland and I demanded to be arrested for this, and they didn't arrest me. They told me to get out of the country, and the Minister of Justice said, "Who does he think he is? He comes into our country and demands to get arrested. Get him out of here." The reason being, they knew that to put me on trial would be to put themselves on trial, because what they're doing is illegal. And so again, this summer when we go to Iceland, if they want to arrest us, that's just fine with me, and then we'll turn that into a trial, because Icelandic whaling is illegal. All commercial whaling was declared illegal in 1986 by the International Whaling Commission, the only recognized authority on this industry. And so since 1986, in that moratorium, about 30,000 whales have been killed.
That is alarming. Now, we need to take a break, Paul. When we come back, I want to regress you back when you were young and find out all about you for the listeners. So stay tuned. We'll be back right after this with Captain Paul Watson. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. Check out our website for the latest news at nightdreamstalkradio.com. We'll be right back.
Looking for Bigfoot or UFO themed merchandise? Look no further. Explore Night Dreams Talk Radio's store for an array of paranormal goodies, from t-shirts to mouse pads to socks to whatever the heck that thing is. Don't miss out on these unique items. Check us out today at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. While you're checking out the cool merchandise, go to the latest news tab to find out what's going on in the world and outside the world. Again, go to www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. Digital broadcasting radio, like it should be. The best in paranormal talk radio, with your host, Gary Anderson.
And we are back with Captain Paul Watson. I got some questions for you. How old are you when you really wanted to go out onto the sea?
Well, I was raised in a fishing village in eastern Canada, so I was very close to the sea. But an event that really changed my life was when I was 10 years old. I spent the summer swimming with a family of beavers and had a great summer. I mean, every day I go there and swim with the beavers, had a lot of fun. And the next year, when I was 11, I returned to the pond that summer, and there were no beavers. They were all gone. And I found out that trappers had taken them all during the winter, and that made me quite angry. So that winter, when I was 11, I began to walk the trap lines and free animals from the traps and destroy the traps. And so I guess I've been doing the same thing all the rest of my life. But in 1969, I was a member of the Sierra Club in British Columbia. And there was a demonstration against nuclear testing at Amchitka Island up in the Aleutians. And it was put together by the Quakers and the Sierra Club. But my concern was that Amchitka was a wildlife preserve, and here you couldn't take a gun onto the island, but we're blowing a 5-megaton bomb up underneath of it. And it killed thousands of sea lions and sea otters from the previous tests. So
no, wait a minute. Captain, you're saying you couldn't go there and hunt on the island, but we could destroy them just by seeing what a detonation of a nuclear device would do.
Yeah, and the shock waves from those explosions killed almost everything around the islands. So we came up with this idea because the Quakers had taken a boat down to the Bikini Atoll in 1956 to protest the bomb down there. So we decided, okay, let's get a boat and let's go up to Amchitka and protest the bomb. And so we got a boat, and at one of the early meetings, we had to set up this group called the Don't Make a Wave Committee to remind people that earthquake, the Anchorage earthquake had caused a tidal wave that hit Vancouver Island and also the Big Island of Hawaii. And so we set up this group called the Don't Make a Wave Committee. And at one of the early meetings, somebody left the meeting and flashed a peace sign. And Bill Darnell, who was one of the first crew members, he said, make it a Greenpeace. And Bob Hunter said, hey, great name for the vote. So we called it the Greenpeace. And then in 1972, we changed the name of the Don't Make a Wave Committee to the Greenpeace Foundation.
Now,
So
you were the co-founder of that, weren't you?
Yes, I was one of the first directors at the Greenpeace. I'm, in fact, the youngest co-founder of Greenpeace.
And can you tell us a little bit about Greenpeace, what their whole goal was?
Well, it was to oppose nuclear testing, but then in 1974, Paul Spong, Bob Hunter, and myself got Greenpeace involved with protecting whales and then also with seals and other issues. And I was the campaign leader for the SEAL campaign. I was the first officer on all the whale campaigns. And in 1975, June of 1975, we were out opposing Russian whaling off the coast of California. This was before the 200-mile limit. And we found the Russian whaling fleet off of Cape Mendocino. Oh, wow. And our idea was to, put ourselves between the harpoon and the whales. We're reading a lot of Gandhi at the time. We thought this was going to work. And so Bob Hunter and I were in a small boat in front of this Soviet harpoon vessel that was bearing down on us at about 22 knots. And in front of us were 8 sperm whales that were fleeing for their life. And every time the harpooner tried to get a shot, I would maneuver the boat to block his aim. And this worked for about 20 minutes until the captain on the Soviet vessel came running down the catwalk, and he screamed into the ear of the harpooner, looked down at us, smiled, brought his finger across his throat, and that's when I realized Gandhi wasn't going to work for us that day. And a few moments later, this horrendous explosion, and the harpoon flew over our head, slammed into the backside of one of the whales in front of us. She screamed, rolled. I didn't even know whales could scream, but she screamed and rolled on her side, blood everywhere. And suddenly the largest whale in the pod rose up, hit the water with his tail, and dove and swam right underneath of us and threw himself straight at the harpooner on the bow of the Soviet vessel. But they were waiting for him with an unattached harpoon, and they fired the harpoon point blank into the whale's head. He fell back in the water, rolling in agony on the surface. And as he did, I caught his eye, and suddenly he dove again, and I saw a trail of bloody bubbles coming at us really fast. And he came up and out of the water at an angle. So the next move was to come straight down on top of us and crush us. And as his head came up out of the water and his eye was right there in front of me, so close I could see my own image in his eye, I suddenly saw understanding, that the whale understood what we were trying to do, because the easiest thing for him to have done is come forward and crush us. But instead, I saw the great effort he made to pull himself back. He began to slide back into the sea, and his eye disappeared beneath the surface, and he died. He could have killed us. He chose to spare our life. So I personally feel indebted to that whale that I'm here today. But I also saw something else in that eye, and it was pity, and not for himself, but for us, that we could take life so thoughtlessly. And then I said to myself, why are the Russians killing these whales? They didn't eat them. You don't eat sperm whale meat. They're killing them for oil. It's a very expensive, high heat-resistant oil. And it was one of the most expensive uses for it was in the construction and maintenance of intercontinental ballistic missiles. And I said, here we are killing this incredibly beautiful, intelligent, self-aware, sentient being for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it struck me. We're insane. And so I said, from that moment on, I'm going to dedicate my life to protecting them and life in the ocean. And that's what I've been doing.
Well, I want to, say thank you, from the bottom of my heart for what you have done. And, here you were with Greenpeace. Why did you leave Greenpeace, and why did you create your other foundation?
Well, Greenpeace's primary, approach was the Quaker bearing witness sort of thing, but non-intervention. And I was totally opposed to that. I felt we had to intervene. In 1977, I was leading the campaign to protect seals off the east coast of Canada. And a sealer was about to club a baby seal. I reached forward and I grabbed this club out of his hand and threw it into the ocean and picked up the seal and took it to safety. And the Greenpeace board then said that they accused me of theft and vandalism. I had stolen the man's property. I destroyed his property. And I said, yeah, but I saved the seal, so that's what I was there for. So I decided that, I wasn't a good fit for Greenpeace. So I set up the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. And the objective being aggressive nonviolence, to intervene aggressively, but to not cause any injury. And mainly to enforce international conservation law. That's one of the reasons that after so many years, over 4 decades of doing this, we not only never injured anybody, but never been convicted of any felony crime ever. Although we've sunk whaling ships, rammed whaling ships, destroyed drift nets and gill nets and everything, people forget that all of these operations we were opposing were illegal.
So that's why a lot of these world governments or governments of these countries didn't come after you, because then it would have drawn more attention to what they've been doing.
Yes, in the early 90s, I went after drift netters in the North Pacific, Japanese drift netters, and I rammed their ships, I destroyed their nets, filmed it all, and the Japanese response was, it didn't happen.
Now, were any threats made to you or your crew members when you were doing this? Did they ever try ramming you or doing anything to sink you or anything?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've been shot at. We've been rammed. In 1979, when I went after the pirate whaler Sierra, he was shooting at us, but I struck him twice and ended his career, really. The Sierra never killed a single whale after that again. The Sierra was a pirate whaler, and we shut down about 6 pirate whalers altogether. And what a pirate whaler was is that it was Japanese, Norwegian owned, had a mixed crew of Norwegians, Japanese and Cape Verdeans and that. Nobody seemed to know who owned it, but the whale meat was ending up being sold in Japan. And of course, everybody denied any responsibility. So that's one of the reasons when we rammed the Sierra and then later sank it in Portugal, there were no charges. It's like it didn't happen.
Yeah, but weren't you at one point one of the most wanted people on the planet?
Well, in 2012, I was. Japan issued a red notice for me for the charge of conspiracy to trespass. The Interpol red notice is for major serial killers, drug traffickers, and war criminals. I'm the only person in history given a red notice for trespassing, and that's for our interventions against their illegal whaling operations in the Southern Ocean. But Japan's a pretty powerful country; it usually gets what it wants. But after 12 years, about 6 months ago, the red notice was dropped. Maybe there's a statute of limitations, I don't know, but it's no longer there. Costa Rica also issued a red notice for my stopping of a shark finning operation in the waters of Guatemala, which I did actually at the request of the Guatemalan government. And they dropped their red notice in 2017 right after an election in Costa Rica with a change of government. So it just shows you how political that was, that they could actually drop it because of a change of government.
We talked a little bit and touched on it about, the slaughter of sharks. How intense is that going on right now?
About 90 million sharks are killed every year, and so it's extremely destructive industry. And we're working all over the world to try and get shark fins banned, and we've got bans in California, for example. There's bans in parts of Europe. But it's a big market. I mean, not many people realize that sharks are being killed not just for shark fin soup in China, but sharks are being killed for many reasons. For parts of building computers, for instance, they use pieces of the shark for, shark skin is used, shark cartilage. You'll find shark oil capsules, which is supposed to be some sort of health benefit. There's a myth that sharks don't get cancer, so they marketed the scheme where if you use shark oil pills, you won't get cancer. Of course, it's not true at all, but people buy a lot of things which are ridiculous in that respect.
That's crazy. How do they capture these sharks?
Usually in nets, gill nets, drift nets, and so that's the primary way of getting it. The number of nets, about 35% of all of the plastic debris in the ocean is from the fishing industry, lines, buoys, shark or nets and things like this. So it's an incredible amount of material that's being used to capture them. We were seizing nets down in the Sea of Cortez, which were used to go after totoaba fish, which is also killing the endangered vaquita. And we pulled literally, I think it was about 120,000 kilometers of nets out of the Sea of Cortez, and then we destroyed the nets.
That is absolutely crazy. And at this level, like we said, about 2035, 2040, I'm concerned that the whole industry of fishing will be totally gone. It will be history.
Well, not only the fishing industry will be gone, the fish will be gone.
Yeah, too.
Yeah.
Except my goldfish, they'll outlive me. I'll tell you that.
Well, the fish, a few years ago, I got Brett Hume, a reporter for the Fox News Network, called me up and he said, "Did you say that worms, trees, and bees were more important than people?" I said, "Yeah, I think I did say that." He said, "How could you say something so outrageous, so unchristian, that whales, trees, bees, and whales are more important than people?" I said, "Well, I said it because they're more important than people, because ecologically, I mean, they can live here without us. We can't live here without them. We don't live in a world without bees and worms and trees and insects and whales. We just simply don't. We need them. They don't need us. So that means ecologically, they're far more important than we are. They are the engineers on Spaceship Earth."
What are the oceans like with contamination out there? How bad is it getting?
Extremely bad. Heavy metal pollution, plastic pollution, chemical pollution, noise pollution. Life is very difficult for living things in the ocean. If you eat fish, then you're eating two things that are going into your body: nanoplastics and mercury and heavy metals. And the bigger the fish, the higher it is on for instance, halibut was very high up on that food chain, heavily intoxicated with methyl mercury. And of course, the nanoplastics, that is the breakdown of plastics into almost microscopic particles of plastic, not only get into the fish, but if you eat fish, then it's pretty much guaranteed you got nanoplastics in your body circulating through your blood and into your organs.
How about radiation from Japan?
Well, that's another problem too. They're dumping radioactive water into the ocean in Japan, and of course, you hear very little about that. It's almost like there's a blackout on news coverage about anything going to do with Fukushima and everything. A lot of things. The problem with the media, the mainstream media, is not fake news. The problem is no news. Things they just simply don't cover certain things because they don't want anybody. Most media outlets are owned by major corporations who have a vested interest in keeping that quiet.
Well, how many people, for example, want to eat fish if they turned the lights off? It would glow in the night. I'm telling you, I was reading just last week about fish, even salmon, that is highly radioactive, and people are consuming it.
Well, if it's in the North Pacific, then it's going to have a level of radioactivity involved primarily because of Fukushima.
Boy, so that too, we have to worry about that. Now, you mentioned before we went on the air, halibut can live how many years?
Up to 200 years of age. We treat every fish as a fish, but, a salmon becomes sexually mature at 4 years and dies. But for orange roughy, as an example, it takes 45 years to become sexually mature and then lives to be 200 years of age. So the long-living fish simply can't keep up with the demands. There's nothing sustainable about this at all. Orange roughy, you can find it in the markets in the 90s everywhere, but you don't see it anymore because we simply fished it out. You don't see Alaskan cod anymore, really. You don't see northern cod from the North Atlantic. That fishery collapsed in 1992 and hasn't recovered.
Well, even here down in the Puget Sound area, you could go out. When I was a kid, the number one fish you would catch was cod.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you go out there and you spend the whole weekend going out there on a boat, dropping, trying to catch, cod, you're lucky if you get one.
And people have adapted to that. So younger people that's just the way it is. They don't remember how it used to be. The Puget Sound area, by the way, is one of the most polluted bodies of waters on the west coast of the United States.
Yeah, and I used to swim in it when I was a kid. I'll tell you that. Now I feel really guilty eating that fish and chips yesterday. The halibut, knowing maybe it could have been, 20, 30, 100 or 200 years old.
Yeah, like I said, I was raised in a fishing village, but I don't eat fish.
I don't know. I think I'm going to stick with broccoli.
To give you an example of adaptation to diminishment, when I was a kid, we had scallops, we had clams, we had, oysters, we had all kinds of fish. The one thing we didn't eat were mussels. And the reason being is in the 50s and 60s and 70s, mussels were considered dirty. Nobody ate them. But now if I go back to my hometown, that's what you get. That's the main thing on the menu is mussels. The scallops are gone, the oysters are gone, the clams are gone. So... but we just adapted to that. It's the same way we adapt to everything else. In 1965, the very idea that you'd be buying water in plastic bottles and paying more for that water than the equivalent amount of gasoline was ridiculous. People would have said, "Oh, nobody's ever going to do that." But that's where we are right now. A liter of water in a bottle is worth more than a liter of gasoline.
That is absolutely crazy. Big companies are in Washington buying mineral rights, water rights. Because they know what the future is going to be. That is really scary too. Most of the bottled water being sold is owned by either Pepsi or by Coke. And a lot of people don't think about this. The water they're getting is basically tap water that is highly filtered.
That's true. One of the interesting things is the cleanest water in the United States is New York City, for all places, because that water comes from the Catskills and the Alleghenies through a network of stone tunnels, and it's very clean water. But still, people have now adapted to diminishment by they buy their water instead of getting it out of the tap in New York. They'd rather buy it in a store. But it's so clean that you can actually in California find a product called New York City tap water, which you can buy in a bottle.
How much for a bottle? I wonder on that one.
Well, usually, bottled water goes anywhere from $1.50 upwards. It depends. It depends on how fancy the bottle is.
I guess that makes a difference too, and what they call it. Again, with this new ship you have, how expensive is it for your organization to refurbish a ship, to get it seaworthy, to fuel it, put a crew on it, to do what you do? How do you do it without, people donating a lot of money?
Well, that's what we depend upon is donations, because each of our ships have cost about an average of $1 million a year to maintain. Buying the ship isn't that expensive, actually. The larger the ship, the less expensive it is, because of really who wants a big ship. So the vessel that we have right now, we put about $2 million into it. But we're always being hit up with not only are fuel charges so high, but for instance, we just arrived in Australia, and next thing you know, we got, well, you can't come into the berth unless you pay this, and this, and that. And it's like $28,000 just to put your ship alongside the dock. And so we have to deal with all this bureaucratic crap all the time. But it is expensive. It's extremely expensive. I mean, that's what they say about ships. It's just a big hole in the water. That the best way to experience being a ship owner is stand under a cold shower, dropping $100 bills down the drain continuously.
Well, I had a couple of boats. The biggest boat I ever had was a 100-footer. But I had one that was a Fairliner. It was built, one of their very few that they built. It was all fiberglass. But they were designed like from the hull of a PT boat, during World War II. Mm-hmm. And, I learned my lesson. It's not like, to go even from like Seattle to Orcas Island and back, it was hundreds of dollars in fuel costs years ago. That's like, burning money like you wouldn't believe.
Well, to fill up the tank on either of our two ships is about $250,000.
So it's not like going down to your local gas station and putting the nozzle in and oh my God, it was $100 to fill my gas tank. You're saying how much to fill up the ship?
$250,000 for to fill up the ship. Yeah.
Do they wash your windows for that price?
No, they don't do that either. But then on top of that, you have to buy lubricating oil. You probably need about 20 barrels at a time every time you do an oil change. Instead of buying liters of oil, you buy barrels of oil. And, you have berthage costs. Fortunately, I have a lot of volunteers, so that cuts down on the overhead.
So the ship you have now, the new one, that roundabout way came from, Japan. How long is that ship? How big a ship is that one?
212 feet in total, and it's a very fast ship. So really, it's probably the biggest and fastest ship that we've ever had. Our other vessel, the John Paul de Joria, was a former Scottish fisheries patrol boat. So both of them are fisheries patrol boats, very fast, long range, and but ideal for what we use them for, but expensive.
It sounds like it. So, boy, you need deep pockets to fill that sucker up.
Well, we just need a lot of support. It's been difficult over the last 2 years because, I was removed from Sea Shepherd, and Sea Shepherd became quite effective thanks to whale wars. It became very successful and, brings in a lot of money. But the problem is everybody got so secure working with Sea Shepherd that their jobs became more important than the things that we were doing. And I became too controversial, too confrontational. So I was forced out of the organization that I created because they wanted to go mainstream, and I didn't. And so what I'm doing right now with the Captain Paul Watson Foundation is continuing to do what I've always done for the last 45 years. I haven't changed. The organizations that I established did change, but I'm continuing to do the same thing. But fortunately, a great number of people came over with me to volunteer as crew and to administer and everything. So, we're basically the same organization that are not allowed to use the name that I created. In fact, we're even being sued. Sea Shepherd Global took us to court in France and claimed that I had no right to be doing what I was doing because basically they say they copyrighted and trademarked anything. But last month we actually won that case and the judge threw it out. They actually accused me of being a parasite. They said that they've charged me with parasitism, that I was taking advantage of their name that they own. And the judge just threw that whole thing out and said that that's ridiculous. They spent literally hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to shut us down by claiming that they own what I created.
And you created it, and they stole it from you.
Absolutely, that's what they did. And I could whine about it, or else I could carry on and go ahead and do what I need to do. And that's what I'm doing right now with the Captain Paul Watson Foundation. By the way, the reason I named it the Captain Paul Watson Foundation is that's going to be difficult to take that away from me because it's in my name. So what I didn't know, I set up Sea Shepherd to be a movement, not an organization. And it never occurred to me that I would be betrayed by people I trusted. And what they did was they covertly, without my knowledge, filed for copyright and trademarks on the logos I created and the name I created. And then suddenly they said, "Hey, we own you."
No, how, when it came to the end, how did they just pull you into a board meeting and say, "Hey, you're no longer associated with us"?
Yeah, in fact, when they wanted me to be a figurehead, and they were going to pay me quite a bit of money to not post anything, not write anything, not give any lectures, not lead any campaigns, and they wanted me to be a figurehead, and I said no, I'm not going to do that. And they looked at me, and the new president looked at me, and he said, "You're a effing employee. You do what you're told." And I said, "I don't think so." And so I left.
I'm glad you really did, because now you knew what type the organization turned into behind your back. How can, because our time is up, how can people donate to what you're doing right now? Can you share your website and all that information to our listeners?
www. Captain Paul Watson Foundation or the Paul Watson Foundation. And the film we'll be doing, the TV show will be called Neptune's Pirates, and so you can also look that up too, Neptune's Pirates or the Captain Paul Watson Foundation. It's on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or also the website.
You know, I used to look forward to Whale Wars. You know that. That was like my favorite show. I didn't even know it existed. My son came up to me and said, "Dad, you got to watch this." And I got hooked on that. I mean, I never knew what you guys were going to do next from one moment to the next moment.
Well, the great thing about Whale Wars is it was totally unscripted. You know, the deal with Animal Planet, with Discovery, was that they don't tell us what to do and we don't tell them how to edit it. And it worked out really well. So it was an authentic reality show. And we're going to do that again with Neptune's Pirates. And I think it'll even be more impressive now that, I have more freedom to do what I need to do.
Well, Captain, I just want to thank you so much again. Please share your website one more time.
www. Captain Paul Watson Foundation or paulwatsonfoundation.org. That's all. Yeah, .org on the end of both of them.
Well, you stay in touch with us, will you?
I will.
Okay, my friend. And you take care and stay safe, will you?
I will. Thank you.
Hey, give me a picture over that new ship, will you?
Yeah, I'll send that to you.
Okay, my friend. You take care.
Okay, bye.
Okay. Well, we're going to be back here after this break. We got a lot going. Our next guest, we're going to be talking about Roswell. Did it actually happen? Was it a weather balloon? Well, you're going to find that out. And thinking about this, going and getting fish and chips, JC, think about this. You're eating maybe shark.
Yeah. I about fell in a chair when I heard that, Gary, because I do eat fish and chips time to time.
Well, yeah, but I thought it was always cod or halibut. Now I feel really guilty. Seriously, eating that fish and chips. I've been eating something that could be maybe 200 years old. I didn't even know a fish could live to 200 years. Did you?
Well, I knew that some whales and sharks get old, but not 200. That's old. Just think they were around when the original pirates were around.
Yeah. And see how to the point now, again, most people, fish and chips. Oh, it's cod. Okay. It's not. To even think about how many people go out and have fish and chips, and how many would never eat it again if they realized it was shark. Think about that. I could just think about it. If I was eating fish and chips and I found out it was shark.
Right. And how devious is it they actually insert it with smells, so it smells like something else, and just everything to falsify it to mimic something else.
I don't know. It's really interesting how our civilization has turned out. I mean, we are killing off the ocean. People just can't comprehend that. I mean, again, I read a journal, a science journal, has said within the next 100 years, the oceans, the Pacific and the Atlantic, will be dead oceans. Think about that.
Yeah. And then he mentioned those 100-mile long fishing nets that weigh 70 tons. I can't even fathom a fishing net that big. That's just mind blowing.
Think about all the other life, sea life that dies just to be able to get fish for, stock animals. That's crazy too. Okay, we're going to be back right after this break. So sit back, get in that easy chair, pour yourself something cold or warm, depending on where you're at, and get ready to talk about Roswell. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
I scrolled down the Insta page, saw a picture that I didn't want to see. You had his hand around your waist and a smile on your face like the way you look at me. 'Cause only 8 months ago he was holding your hand, slow dancing and...
From best-selling author Paul Wallace, The Invasion of Eden. Did our ancestors warn us about ET invasions? And is history repeating itself in the 21st century? The standoff between the Pentagon and the U.S. Congress has exposed a dark web of secrecy surrounding UFO retrievals. The Invasion of Eden explores archaeological sites, biblical and ancestral narratives from around the world. Probing military intelligence, ancient indigenous knowledge, and sources close to prime ministers and presidents, Paul asks, what are the signs that our civilization may be on the cusp of a whole new world of ET contact? Laura Eisenhower says The Invasion of Eden is a must-read book in these most critical times. Eric von Daniken adds, Paul Wallace is a brilliant author. I have full respect for him. The Invasion of Eden, in paperback on Amazon, April 9th.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Night Dreams brings on the night worldwide. Did you know you can find us on your favorite app? And now you can watch us live on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. And now, here's Gary.
And we are back, and here is, Guy Ticker with the latest news.
From the NDTR Newsroom, I'm Guy Ticker, Night Dreams Talk Radio News Director, anchor, reporter, submariner, and deputy snake charmer. A fourth victim from last month's Baltimore Bridge collapse has been recovered after salvage crews located the body trapped in one of the missing construction vehicles underwater. 6 people died when the Francis Scott Key Bridge fell on March 26th after it was struck by a large container ship. The FBI has opened a criminal investigation into the incident, sources told the BBC's U.S. partner, CBS. It will examine the circumstances leading up to the incident. Federal agents have been present at the site since the occurrence. No kidding. UFOs have shown the ability to seamlessly transition from air to sea without a splash or crash debris, and that's an urgent national security concern. The USS Omaha recorded a UFO that buzzed a Navy fleet off San Diego and disappeared into the ocean without a trace. The video, first released by Jeremy Corbell and verified by the Pentagon, displays capability that, according to retired Rear Admiral Tim Galladay, jeopardizes U.S. maritime security, which is already weakened by our relative ignorance about the global ocean. Galladay, also an oceanographer, added, the fact that the DoD is not raising a giant red flag is a sign that the government is not sharing all it knows about all domain anomalous phenomena. In other news, alongside the BRICS de-dollarization plan, that's a real thing, the Chinese yuan has officially overtaken the US dollar as the top traded currency in Russia. Indeed, the currency has now surpassed the greenback as the most prominent foreign exchange in Moscow, according to a Reuters report. The data shows that the yuan has accounted for more than 42% of currency trades in Russia. Alternatively, that figure outshines the US dollar share of 39.5%. Moreover, the figure showed that the trading volumes for the yuan has tripled to reach $385 billion in 2023. Oh my. A series of mysterious giant skeletons up to 10 feet tall, reportedly discovered in and around Nevada caves last century, dubbed the Giants of Lovelock, are still baffling scientists decades later. The claims about supersized humans who roam the area around Lovelock, a remote town 90 miles northeast of Reno, thousands of years ago, are rooted in Native American lore, which tells of fierce, red-headed, pale-skinned giants who arrived from Central America by boat and attacked local tribes. After years of war, the foreign invaders were chased into a cave and slaughtered en masse, according to stories passed down by the indigenous Paiute people. Some years later, an article published in the Nevada Review Minor in 1931 announced the discovery of 2 mummified skeletons in a dry lake bed outside Lovelock. The remains reportedly measured 8.5 feet and 10 feet, respectively, and were described as having red hair. For comparison, retired NBA star Shaquille O'Neal stands 7 feet 1 inch tall and wears size 22 shoes. And finally, Britain may have its very own Bigfoot roaming one of their national parks, terrified locals say. Fishermen making late-night visits to an idyllic lake in South Downs revealed a growling creature patrols the area and has been spotted escaping down a dangerous hill no human would dare venture the incline, with anglers concluding the strange noises and bumps in the night are the result of an elusive creature. Members of the Cryptid and Paranormal Investigations group on Facebook observed multiple instances of close calls with the creature so evil it made fishermen up sticks and depart straight away. Now that's clearly British. I'm Guy Ticker. The news is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. To submit a story or to get the latest news, go to nightdreamstalkradio.com, because the truth is out there.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Night Dreams brings on the night worldwide. Did you know you can find us on your favorite app? And now you can watch us live on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. And now, here's Gary.
And we are back with our second guest. We're going to be talking about Roswell. Is it folklore? Did it really happen? Was it a weather balloon or was it a UFO? Congress put on the circus about disclosure. So many ufologists called me up during that whole time, a testimony saying, well, major disclosure was being told. Well, as far as I'm concerned, no, it wasn't. If you want disclosure, you want to go back to 1947. Think of that night. It was heavy rain, thunder, lightning, and radar towers transmitting low-frequency radio waves. And the craft coming down and probably picked up between the radar waves and the thunder and lightning had a malfunction or something happened, and it crashed and skinned the ground. And then it crashed a few miles later. And again, think about disclosure. Was it a weather balloon or was it a craft? Too much points to it was real. The Army Air Force announced that they had wreckage of a UFO. What better disclosure could you ever ask for? So many people have told me, well, that happened in 1947. That disclosure doesn't count. That's ancient history. Well, you know what? Congress did their little thing. That's ancient history. If you want really proof of what happened, I think our next guest, who has made documentaries about this subject, I think will be able to explain it to all of us, for we understand what happened that night in 1947. JC, who is our guest?
Well, our guest tonight, Gary, is L.A. Marzulli. He is a frank supernaturalist who lectures on the subjects of UFOs, the Nephilim, and ancient prophetic text. He is also an author, lecturer, and filmmaker who has penned 12 books.
L.A., are you there? I think we lost L.A. Okay, well, I'm going to get some music going and we'll try to get him back. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. L.A., are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I was nervous there. Anytime I on the air, all of a sudden I don't have the guest.
No, I've been here. Listen to the whole monologue. Good stuff.
Okay, I got to ask you a question. How old were you when you got interested in UFOs?
12.
At 12 years old, what made you get interested?
Well, I saw one, and that changed my life on some level. I was at Boy Scout camp Camp Horseshoe in Rising Sun, Maryland. I was with 3 other boys. We were taking a shortcut in a dry creek bed to our scout camp. It was time for lunch, and I was the 4th boy. We were skipping over these rocks. It was a beautiful sunny day, not a cloud in the sky, and the lead boy goes, "Wow, what's that?" And the other 2 boy goes, "Wow, what is that?" And I go, "Where?" And they point there. And I look up, it's the classic silver disc, Gary, classic silver disc. It's hovering in the sky. If I put my thumb at arm's length, right, it's about the size of my thumbnail, maybe a tad bigger. And the sun was glinting off of it. And we watched it for maybe 20, 25 seconds. This thing shot straight up in the air and was gone in a twinkling of an eye. We ran back as fast as we could the rest of the way to the scout camp. We saw a flying saucer. We saw a UFO. All the kids came out of the cabins. The scoutmasters crowded around us. I can see it like it was yesterday. And, we were laughed at and questioned and everything else. By the evening meal, remember, this was at lunchtime. By the evening meal, the other 3 boys denied that they had ever seen anything. And I would not back down from a story. I know what I saw. I know what the truth was. And that started the quest. And now it's, 10 films just on the UFO phenomena, which we just finished 9 and 10. What is the truth? Which will be released by the end of the month.
That sounds interesting. We lost your video feed for some reason. Again, too, when you saw that and then the other boys changed their story that, I didn't see a UFO. I mean, how did people respond to you?
Well, I mean, going back when I have my video, I turned off my camera because do you want the video on?
Oh yeah, people expect to see my guests now.
Okay, I had no idea. No one told me that. So no worries, the video's back on. Here's the deal. I know what I saw. And it was my first lesson in herd mentality, where because of the ridicule and the name calling, the other 3 boys stepped away. Oh, we didn't see it. We just made it up. And I'm going, no, we didn't just make it up. Gary, I can see that in my mind's eye. And I'll be 74 this year, okay? It's a long time ago, 62 years ago, right? It's a long time ago. I can see it like it was yesterday in my mind's eye. And that's the deal. Once a person has an encounter, it's there. I mean, it's visceral. It's there. Because you see something that's outside your grid system, cognitive dissonance can certainly slip in. Oh, I didn't see anything. Yeah, I'm not dealing with that. That's cognitive dissonance. But I knew what I saw, and I wanted answers. And, that's 62 years ago, and here we are. And I think I've got answers.
What did it look like? Do you remember?
Exactly like this, since I'm on the audio feed. Exactly like this. Exactly.
Wow. And what was it? Was it moving, stationary?
Yeah, it came in. When I saw it, it was stationary. It was like this, just sitting there in the sky. The sun was glinting off of it. And like I said, 20, 25 seconds. And then this thing just went whoosh, straight up. I mean, straight up without a sound, and was gone.
How big was it?
Okay, there you are, this big. That big. See, I have all my props ready.
I noticed. Yeah.
Oh yeah. This is it. About like that. Just about like that.
Now, some people claim they have portals and windows and aliens are looking at us. Did you see anything like that? Because I don't buy that.
Well, in the Fatima apparitions, first of all, I didn't see anybody in the craft, too far away. But in the Fatima apparitions of 1917,
And remember, it had been raining all day. The sun was obscured. It was very cloudy. All of a sudden, around 11:30, 12 o'clock, the clouds part. There's the sun. Then there's another cloud which moves in front of the sun. My face, let's say, is the sun. So the cloud moves in front of a sun. Out of that cloud comes a dull silver spinning disk. What does that sound like to you? And you remember in 1917, there's nothing in the vernacular for UFO or flying saucer. 1917, I saw a dull silver disc. That's what the eyewitnesses say. How do we know that? Father Friera, the parish priest, took everything down longhand, and it came out of the clouds, and it spun like this, and then fell down, and then went back up into the clouds. It did this 3 times. The last time it came down, it did what is called the flyby, where it came in like this and flew over the heads of the people before it went up. All right? So it came in like this, flew over the heads of the people, then went back up into the cloud. The third time it passed over, again, this is handwritten documentation, eyewitness testimony, and you remember there's no verbiage for UFO or flying saucer in 1917. It's not there. It's not in the lexicon. So people are grappling. What am I seeing? They saw, according to some of the witnesses, entities, humanoid-like figures waving at them, or standing in the windows as the craft flew over. So it's very complex. It's very complex. And notice it went into the clouds, and hopefully we'll get into that and why that's important. It went into the clouds. It came out of the clouds and then went back into the clouds. This is why I call that film Fatima. It's on our site, lamarzulli.com. lamarzulli.com. There's Fatima 1 and Fatima 2, Harbingers of Deception, Strange Phenomena. We were there in Portugal. We interviewed some of the leading experts in that phenomena that happened, well over 100 years ago now. It's just unbelievable. And we were there in 2017 at the anniversary, the 100-year anniversary. Deep dive, lots of information, probably too much information. You have to take it in small doses.
But when you think about it, even in paintings going back 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 300 years ago, guess what? There's been paintings with disc in it in the sky. So, people have known that these things existed for, centuries.
And that's true to a point. In the second season of the History Channel, I was on season 1 and season 2 of Ancient Aliens, and I left. And it was probably a huge mistake. I should have just stayed. I was the only dissenting voice in the ancient astronaut theorist. But they were taking what I was saying and twisting my words, which is why I left. And they had me weigh in on these paintings that you're talking about. And I did due diligence. I went to art historians and I said, what are we looking at here? One of the famous ones is you've got a picture of the sun and the moon, and there's guys inside the sun and the moon. And it looks like they're controlling a craft. That's not what it is. It's anthropomorphic. And unless you're an art historian, you don't know that. So if you're untrained in what the artist is trying to convey, because the artist has one panel, that's it. He's got one panel to show you what's going on. Whereas in the film industry, we've got, it's moving, right? Camera's moving. But in art and painting, you've got one frame, one panel to convey what you want to convey. So that famous painting that so-called ancient astronaut theorists point to as being ships from another world, it's not that at all. It's anthropomorphic. They're creating the sun and the moon and giving them human characteristics. But unless you do the deep dive and you go to an art historian, you don't know that. And that's what I did. So when they interviewed me, when they interviewed me on this, I didn't give them the answers that they wanted. I gave them the truth, or what I perceived was the truth, based on my research with art historians and my own deep dive into the subject. Well, that Ancient Alien series, I believe it was series number 2, season number 2, there was a skip between episodes because they panicked. Because I didn't tell them what they wanted to hear. They had to completely redo that segment. I'm just saying. And then the third season, they wanted me to rail against the Vatican. And I wrote them back and said, guys, I'm not going to do this. I'm not a Catholic. I don't believe in some of what the Vatican teaches. Actually, a lot of what the Vatican teaches. But I'm not going to sit here and rail against the largest religious institution on the planet. I just won't do that. And that's why we created our own series, the Watcher series, with my late partner, Richard Shaw. And we created 11 films in that series. Richard passed away. I went off on my own, although I went off on my own before Richard passed away. And we had lunch once a week, and we're good friends until the end. But we had just a discrepancy in what films we wanted to make. Richard was wanting to make films on the Ark of the Covenant. I was on UFOs and on the Trail of the Nephilim. So we were, in different, kind of running in different circles. But that led to the first UFO film, followed by Fatima, followed by 7 on the Trail of the Nephilim. Actually, there's 8 now. 8 on the Trail of the Nephilim series, followed by 10 films on the burgeoning UFO phenomena. And we have everything from Close Encounters of the First, Second, Third, Fourth Kind, abductions, crop circles, cattle mutilations, Roswell 1 and 2, exoneration, in the debris field, and finally 9 and 10 are What is the Truth? So, we've done a deep dive on the subject. And, what amazes me about all these shows, and it's not your show or I was on Coast to Coast last night or anything else. Coast to Coast used to be a huge deal. It's not anymore. Everything has changed. Everything is.
I'm going to step in. Art Bell was a close friend of mine.
Okay, there you go.
And I was retired. And, when he started his other show, Midnight in the Desert, after he ended it, he called me up and he said, get rid of your Harley motorcycle, because I would go up there in the summertime and see him. He said, get rid of it before you kill yourself. Get back on radio. And I did. And, I kind of do a format, kind of like Art's. What I'm really upset, because I know you do a podcast. There's a million podcasts out there, but
Exactly.
Here's the problem, is it has changed. And now it is a lot of hype and a lot of garbage. It's not like when Art Bell did it.
No, it's not.
A lot of people don't realize Art Bell got into what he was doing with, Coast to Coast when he got that on premiere originally, is because John Lear came up to him when he was doing his talk show in Las Vegas and said, you know what? Why don't you talk about paranormal? Why don't you talk about UFOs? Art thought about it and he jumped on it. And that was the smartest thing, because we wouldn't be talking about what we're talking about right now if it wasn't for Art. He opened that whole subject up to everybody.
I completely concur. I remember I would be in the recording studios in Los Angeles till like 1 a.m, and I'd be driving home listening to Art Bell. I was a fan. I was never on Art's show, but in 2000, I think I was on George Norrie for the first time, and that's 24 years ago. And I've been on. I'm usually on once every 6 months, once every 4 months, depending on what we finished. And I was on last night. And it was great, but everything has changed, and I've been bagging on this on every talk show that I'll be 74 in December. Okay, so a lot of some of these shows that I'm on, I'm grandpa. I mean, I'm old enough to be the host grandfather. And what really drives me nuts, Gary, and Art would stand toe to toe with anybody because Art did his homework. Art knew what he was talking about. And a lot of these guys, they come on, and the young people today, all they want is like a 2-minute short. That's it. Give me TikTok. Give me the shorts. Give me this. And so there's no substance to anything. And my new battle cry to the young people is, and I'm echoing Chuck Missler's battle cry: do your homework, kids. Do your homework. You need to sit down and spend an hour or an hour and a half and watch our Roswell film. Because a 2-minute short or a trailer isn't going to do it justice. I've spent hundreds of hours exploring everything UFO, all ufology. That's why we have 10 films. That just didn't come out of the ufology tree in the backyard. It represents hundreds and hundreds of hours of research and talking to people and reading and going where other people have already gone and then going further than what they've gone. And that's the problem. I mean, the internet's great, but the whole thing is, in my opinion, has dumbed down society to the point. You probably saw this at the Super Bowl. There was an ad. I don't even know what the ad was for, but it was called Hello Down There. And these extraterrestrials are in a ship, just like this, and they're trying to get people's attention. And there's some woman on her cell phone watching, and she gets bored of looking at the UFO hovering overhead, and she swipes it, and there's a cat clawing the toilet paper in the bathroom, and that's what she focuses on. And this is exactly where we are as a society, as a culture, as a globe. People, for the most part, don't read. This is why all print is going out of style. Right now, I mean, I've got numerous books that I'm reading and going through and underlying and making notes on. My library burned in a 2018 fire. I had probably 1,500 books, dog-eared, notes in them. It was my research library. Probably, I don't know, 400 or 500 books on UFOs, whatever. I mean, and some of that stuff goes back 40, 50 years, like Peter Tompkins' Secrets of the Great Pyramid. I mean, I read that when I was, 17, 18 years old. Carlos Castaneda, and a Yaqui way of knowledge, Yaqui way of knowledge. All that burned in the fire, and I can't replace it, and I know that. And, you don't remember 50 years ago. I mean, you know what I'm saying? But the bottom line is, and I'll get off this little rant, the kids today are clueless, and they won't do the homework. They don't want to do the homework. They want the Cliff Notes. They want the 2-minute short on TikTok or the 2-minute short on YouTube. And it's as a culture, it's indicative of where we are.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. To me, I've been in broadcasting 53 years.
There you go.
Early 70s. And to me, it's a slap in the face. One, people call their podcast like with some call letters from a radio station. That really offends me. But, the thing is that everybody out there doesn't do research. Everybody wants to be a podcast or a radio star, a talk show host. And you know what offends me? If you get on to TikTok or you get on to Facebook Live, these people are doing the most horrible things you could ever think about, covering ufology or cryptic things by, they're sitting, eating sandwiches, doing their interviews. Non-professional. We're going to be right back with LA. We got to take this break, and when we come back, I want to talk about Roswell, because that is something I've done a lot of research on. And I tell you what, Congress and everybody told me, guess what? Major disclosure. I've heard this so much to the point when somebody calls me up or sends me email, hey, it's going to be announced next week. Major disclosure, Gary. I have, the whole thing was a circus with Congress. I'll be honest with you. And, I've had some famous people on my show. When we talk about Roswell, they say, guess what, LA? It doesn't matter. That happened years ago. That happened in 1947. That doesn't count. Well, guess what? Congress did their thing. I guess that's history too, so that don't count. We're going to be back with LA right after this. You're listening to, Night Dreams Talk Radio.
To star on the red carpet and on the air with Gary Anderson. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to the big get, Gary's got him. Like voiceover artist Jim Meskimen. Is his mom really Mrs. C on Happy Days? Allison Arngrim from Little House on the Prairie. Oh, speaking of Little House, Gary's got Dean Butler from the show talking about his book, Prairie Man, My Little House Life and Beyond. Here's much more. Yeah, there is. Check this out. Loretta Swit, Hot Lips Houlihan from MASH. So listen to Gary Anderson, because you never know who's gonna show. That's why we do these promos, right? Gary Anderson, where the stars come out to play. Tune in early, tune in often, right here on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. from best-selling author Paul Wallace, The Invasion of Eden. Did our ancestors warn us about ET invasions? And is history repeating itself in the 21st century? The standoff between the Pentagon and the U.S. Congress has exposed a dark web of secrecy surrounding UFO retrievals. The Invasion of Eden explores archaeological sites, biblical and ancestral narratives from around the world. Probing military intelligence, ancient indigenous knowledge, and sources close to prime ministers and presidents, Paul asks, what are the signs that our civilization may be on the cusp of a whole new world of ET contact? Laura Eisenhower says The Invasion of Eden is a must-read book in these most critical times. Eric von Daniken adds, Paul Wallace is a brilliant author. I have full respect for him. The Invasion of Eden, in paperback on Amazon, April 9th. Coming to you live and covering all time zones like a glove. Here's Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio.
And we're back with L.A. You know, by the way, I'm only about 8 months younger than you, by the way. So we're both old farts, you know that, in this field. But, you know, when you really think about Roswell, something really happened. If you really think about it, I mean, why would the Army Air Force announce to the news media, to the wire, that they had wreckage of a UFO, and why did they change it?
Well, that's exactly it. You're talking about the July 8th paper. I've got it right here on my desk. This is a replica. It's not the real deal, but 77 years ago, there it is right there.
Yeah, well, why would they announce it if they didn't have something like that? I could imagine they announced it without approval.
That's exactly what happened. And then the higher ups went, whoa, can't have that. The next day, July 9th, the same paper, the Roswell Daily. Let me get General Ramey's deal. Basically, General Ramey says right here, Ramey says, excitement not justified. And that became the deliberate obfuscation of the truth. The truth was July 8th. They did recover it. That's why the film is called Exoneration. Unlike other films that delve into the Roswell incident, we took the angle of, well, what happened to the Marcel family? How did this impact the Marcel family? How is it that Jesse Marcel Sr. Is basically, in my opinion, he's the Lee Harvey Oswald of ufology. He's a patsy. He's a setup. He's the fall guy. And, we show a clip that someone filmed. It's only like about a minute, so we use it in the film. But Jesse Marcel Sr. is in the debris field, probably for the first time since he was there in 47. It's decades later. He's an old man. And he looks right at the camera and he goes, they wanted me to come up to the microphones and say something, but that's not what I did. And he's very earnest about this, very earnest. And then General Ramey says, then General Ramey said, nothing you see here was just a weather balloon. And then he pauses and he looks right at the camera. And he's got a little smile on his face and he says, but we both knew differently. And we fought that in the film. We interviewed Jesse Marcel Jr. before he passed away. And he was an 11-year-old boy at the time. He handled the wreckage. We also interviewed Linda Marcel, Jesse Marcel Jr.'s widow, and his daughter, Denise. And then there's all these other people that come around in the film that basically tell the same story, that something crashed, it was all covered up, and you were threatened or you were ridiculed. And this began decades of deliberate obfuscation from our government until 2017 on Tucker Carlson with Commander David Fravor. Even though that footage was available on YouTube, I think in 2005, no one paid any attention to it. In fact, I'll tell you something. When that footage was released, I realized at a conference, and I don't know who gave it to me, someone walked up to the table, handed me a thumb drive, and then walked away. I put the thumb drive in my computer, and there it was. It was a FLIR footage of like an F-18 or I don't know what jet it was, but it was tracking a UFO. And it's the same footage, the exact same footage where you hear Commander David Fravor go, "Whoa, got it," where he does that. It's the same footage. I had that 2007, 2010, I don't even know. And that burned in the fire, so I don't even have it anymore. But I remember looking at it and going, well, I can't vet this. There's no provenance. I don't know where it came from. Some guy hands it to me at a conference and then he disappears. What am I supposed to do with this? So I didn't do anything with it because I don't know whether it's real. There's no provenance to it. And later on, I'll never forget it when I saw that clip from Commander David Fravor. And he goes, "Whoa, got it." And the thing is traveling like this over the ground. It's the same footage, guys. It's the same footage, Gary, which kind of blew me away. So Roswell was real. It was a cover-up created by the higher-ups. The weather balloon story is an absolute, crock. And what's interesting is, go ahead.
Didn't they change the story even on the weather balloon?
Well, in the book, Roswell Case Closed, they did some backpedaling there. They said, well, it really wasn't a weather balloon. It was Project Mogul, this top secret weather balloon nonsense. Well, weather balloons, this is the July 8th. Mr. and Mrs. Dan Wilmot apparently were the only persons in Roswell who have seen what they thought was a flying disc. They were sitting on their porch about 10 minutes before 10 o'clock when a large glowing object zoomed out of the sky from the southeast. Wilmot called Mrs. Wilmot attention to it, and both ran down into the yard to watch it. It was in sight less than a minute, perhaps 40 to 50 seconds, Wilmot estimated. Wilmot said that it appeared to him to be about 1,500 feet high and going really fast. He estimated between 400 and 500 miles per hour. In appearance, it looked oval and looked like two saucers face mouth to mouth, or like two type wash bowls placed together in the same fashion. The entire body glowed as though light were showing through the inside, though not like it would be if a light were merely underneath. I mean, what do you do with this? This is July 8th. This is an eyewitness. Weather balloons, including Project Mogul, don't come in at 400 or 500 miles an hour. It's an impossibility. It's just such nonsense. So they just completely discounted all the eyewitnesses. This thing's flying in, two inverted saucers. I mean, this is what they saw. The whole thing's glowing up. It hits the land, and part of it creates debris field number one. Then it goes to a second site and crashes. That's where the bodies and the actual craft was recovered. Then we've got the deathbed confession from Walter G. Hout, who basically, it was a sealed affidavit not to be opened until after his death. And he said, look, I was in Hangar 84. I saw the craft. I saw the bodies under a tarp. We handled the metal. Ramey, myself, Jesse Marcel, Sr., other people around a table. We had pieces of the records. No one had ever seen anything like this. We didn't know what it was from. I was in Hangar 84. We actually show that in the second film in the debris field right there. So there are the two films. And, there's like 2.5 hours worth of film there. And you need to do your deep dive. We're not going to be able to get and relate what's in that film, exoneration and in the debris field. But we went to the debris field, and what we found there was incredible. Let me just show you, since you guys can see right here. You can see that piece of metal in his hand. See that?
Yeah, I do.
And this is Frank Kibler and Chuck Zukowski. They had two metal detectors, and we were there, my business partner, Gil Zimmerman, Jim Peterson, and I, in the debris field. And Frank Kibler goes, hey, guys, I got a hit. The cameras are rolling. We go rolling over there. He's got a little garden spade. He digs down about 6 to 8 inches. He finds the metal. It's all on film. We've tested the metal. Kibler tested the metal. Zukowski tested the metal because we found two pieces. It's an aluminum alloy from the 7000 series, but that 7000 series wasn't invented until 1953, and it's not an exact match. The isotopic ratios don't match. It's close to the 7000 series, but it's not an exact match. And the metallurgist who examined it said, whatever this is, whatever it was, wherever it is, it showed trauma, severe trauma, basically high heat, that type of thing, which is exactly what we would expect. So what the Army did the powers that be, they went into the debris field and they put these large spikes. We found one. I have it. It's in my studio. And what they did is they pounded these spikes down into the ground and set them down so people with metal detectors like Frank Kimbler would have a false reading. We found one. But Kimbler knew the site. He'd been there numerous times. And Frank Kimbler knew where to go. And we found 2 pieces of metal. He told us on the record that it was the first time in 12 years where the actual metal from the craft was actually discovered. That's 76 years ago. And that was last July. And that just blew me completely out of the water. And you can see it in the film. My face is beaming from ear to ear. I can't even believe that we found pieces of the wreckage. They didn't get it all, Gary, because when the thing hit, it exploded like this. It went bam like that. And some of the metal, yeah, there was debris and you could pick it up. But other parts were really small and shot out like a bullet out of a gun and buried themselves into the dirt. This is why they didn't get it all. And some of it's still there. The debris field is absolutely out in the middle of nowhere. And what's really interesting is that the 509th Bombing Group, Jesse Marcel Sr., was the 509th Bombing Group's intelligence officer. This isn't Elmer Fudd. Okay, this guy is really smart. He knows what's going on. He's trained. He knows what the Russians have, what the Chaikovs have, what the Nazis had. He knows everything because he's the intelligence officer of the 509th Bombing Group. And the 509th is the bombing group that dropped the atom bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Isn't that interesting? So it's a very complex scenario. But in 47, Roswell happens. In 48, Israel becomes a nation. So you've got 45 with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 47, Kenneth Arnold over Mount Rainier. I saw disc-like objects, flying saucers. 47, you got Roswell. 48, you got the nation of Israel for the first time in thousands of years becoming a nation gathered from the four corners of the earth, which, by the way, fulfills biblical prophecy, which was written thousands of years ago. And if you want to find that out for yourself, go to Amos. He's just a prophet. Go to chapter 9 and read verse 14 and 15. It'll blow your mind. It'll absolutely blow your mind. There it is, written thousands of years ago, and now it's reality.
Well, again, with Congress, they had these people from the government testify to Congress that no, Roswell never happened. They never recovered anything. It was a weather balloon. How naive do they think we really are? Again, maybe from what standpoint, you have to remember Orson Welles, War of the World.
That's why they did it. That's why the cover up.
Yeah, but people were panicking when that play went over the air. In my state, in Washington, there's a little town called Concrete. And people were panicking because when that was started on the radio, they lost their power. So the people were out on the streets with guns because they were worried about these ETs were going to come and destroy their community. And people were panicking. So maybe again, think about this. They're never going to come clean to us because I've said this so many times, LA, on the show. If the government comes clean and says, well, we have wreckage of UFOs.
Now what?
You know what? Then nobody's going to believe anything the government says ever again.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why they can't. And this is the thing. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. And this is where we are. For me, one of the most important dynamics, the importance of David Grush's testimony, whistleblower. And we show this in our film on Roswell. I mean, we show it because it's that important. When Grush, actually it's 9 and 10, what is the truth? That's where we show it. But when Nancy Mace, Representative Nancy Mace from South Carolina, says to David Grush, where did you retrieve crash? And he said, yes. Then she goes, well, were there bodies in these crashed craft? And he says, yes, we recovered biologics. And she follows up, well, were these human biologics? And he goes, they were non-human biologics. I mean, there you go. Now, granted, He's secondhand information. Did he see anything? We'll never know. He was on Tucker Carlson for an hour, Grush was, basically exonerating himself, because this is what they do. Ad hominem attacks, that they went after Grush tooth and nail for being the whistleblower in the halls of Congress. But later on, a couple of weeks later, there was a follow-up, and it was basically one big nothing burger. And Anna Paulina Luna stated on the record that Grush is saying that these are extra-dimensional, interdimensional entities. That's my wheelhouse, Gary. That's what I've been warning against for 30 years, for crying out loud. All my books, all my DVDs promulgate the theory, which is exactly the opposite of what mainstream ufology teaches. These are not extraterrestrial. You know, look, when I'm in a UFO meeting group or UFO Congress, or and I'm never invited anymore because they know where I stand, and that's fine, and that's okay. But they don't want to hear the other side of the story, which is now who's intolerant. But I digress. So here's the deal. I will look at the audience and I will say, how many of you think it's okay to abduct, to kidnap a 5-year-old boy and implant him? Anybody? Anybody here? Never a hand goes up, Gary. Not one. Never a hand goes up. And I look at the audience and go, you guys already know what's going on. Why aren't you saying, well, their ways are not our ways and they're higher than we are and blah. They're our space brothers. They have their reasons. Nonsense. Everybody knows it's wrong. Everybody knows it's wrong. No one ever raises their hand. And that's my launch pad. From there, I go off and start talking about, is it okay to abduct people? Is it okay to impregnate women? Is it okay to take sperm from men? Is it okay to come back in the 3rd month of pregnancy and take the fetus, the hybrid baby that's inside the woman, and take that from her against her will? Is it okay to float people through the windows? Is it okay to mind meld people? Because that's what they do, implant false memories. I mean, the list is endless. It just goes on and on. Is it okay to sadistically torture people through bizarre sexual experiments? Which, as Jacques Vallée says, I mean, surely if these people are really our space brothers coming from some other planet, they don't have to do this stuff.
Well, LA, but think about this. If it was off-world, how many times do they have to keep coming down to collect DNA? They could, as you know, we can now, produce DNA. We can plant it if we want to. We can create all kinds of things with DNA. They would, if they were so far advanced, why would they have to keep abducting people, implanting people, and then collecting their semen, their eggs, and DNA? That doesn't make logical sense. It's something else going on.
There's something else going on. I'll give you 2 biblical scriptures. And for your audience, if you think you know the Bible, but you've never read it and you've never studied it, then that's a mixture of ignorance and arrogance. And yes, I'm your grandfather, so listen up. But it's a mixture of ignorance and arrogance, okay? We're not talking religion, stained glass windows, monks with funny haircuts, rosaries and nuns and priests and stinking incense. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about ancient prophetic texts, which tell us, in my opinion, what is the truth. Genesis 3:15 says this, that your seed, the seed of the dragon will be at war. The seed, the offspring of the dragon, will be at war and enmity with the seed of the woman. The one coming from the woman, the Messiah, will crush the dragon's head. That, Gary, is a 3-hour conversation. It's a 3-hour conversation because that's the gateway to the entire biblical prophetic narrative. It's not taught in the churches. Most people don't even know it. Pastors that go to seminary, they're not taught that. So they don't understand the entire biblical narrative. Because when you get to the flood of Noah, you go, well, what's going on here? When you get to the Tower of Babel and the languages are confused, what's happening here? When you get to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, you're left scratching your head. When you plug in the Nephilim, the mixing of the seed, everything goes back to Genesis 3:15. It is the gateway to the biblical prophetic narrative. 2,500 years ago, an entity appeared to this guy by the name of Daniel. And he told Daniel, Dan, seal up the words in this book until the time of the end. So the book of Daniel has been sealed. Now, I don't mean literally, but people will look at it and go, I don't know, I don't understand what this means until the time of the end. The angel, the entity, gives Daniel a clue of what the time of the end will look like. This is what he says. It's written 2,500 years ago. Men will run to and fro over the face of the earth. Knowledge will increase. Knowledge increases now in modernity every 6 months and does so exponentially. As we are speaking, men and women roam and travel over the face of the earth via the airplane. We are in that era. Daniel chapter 2, verse 43, you should read it for yourself. Their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to them. The word cleave, and I got this from my battle buddy Jim Williamson, the word cleave is exactly the same word that we see in the Genesis account where it says a man will leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife. It's a marriage contract. Guess what? There's no marriage contract in the modern day abduction. They just do it. They just take what they want. Their seed, think about this, 2,500 years ago this is written, their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave to them. I mean, if that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what else does, because this is where we are. The mingling of the seed is happening as we speak. It's in our films, and we did a deep dive. And we also know with the cow mutilations, we may be, and I've said this on numerous shows, we may be the first researchers ever to really figure out what the cow mutilations are about. The blood is drained from the animal, genetic material is taken, the ovum, the sex organs are cored out, the eye, the tongues are excised, whatever. When a woman is impregnated by them, then she's re-abducted in the 3rd month of her pregnancy. How do we know this? Because we published Karen Wilkinson's book, Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. I got all my props right here. But Karen was an abductee. She was taken. She was impregnated by them 3 different times. So in the 3rd month of her pregnancy, she's re-abducted. They take the entity. They take the fetus out of her womb. Get this. Get this. And this is why it's so important to understand. Cow blood, bovine blood, the blood from a cow, can be used in human transfusions. Not many people know that. And it's approved by the AMA.
I didn't even know that. That is interesting. But, you know, when you talk about cattle mutilation, Ellie.
Gary, let me get to the punchline, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
2 more sentences. They take that baby out in the 3rd month of pregnancy. It can't survive. They have created an artificial womb using the bovine blood, which is interchangeable with human blood, and the genetic material from the cows to create an artificial womb. That's where the hybrids go in to come to full gestation.
That is very interesting. But, you know, I talked to a pathologist back about 2 years ago. There was a bull that was mutilated in Oregon. And what he did is when he checked out the animal, he said that animal was standing when all this happened. Because the way the blood, you know, the eyes removed, the fluid between the eyes and the brain ran off to the side. And in the way it ran, he said that animal had to be standing when all that happened.
It is the darkest film I've ever made with my business partner, Gil Zimmerman. Both of us were just blown away by the information. We talked to Rancher Miller, who's lost 16 head of cows. We talked to Judy Messeline on the UFO Watchtower in Amalusa, and with Snippy the horse, which was ground zero. It was a deep dive into the calling card of darkness. That's what we call it. Chuck Zukowski, he's Mr. Cattle Mutilation himself. He's done well over 50 of these things. And we interviewed Chuck at his house, in his office, and then Chuck took us to Rancher Miller and Judy Messeline. And it's a very intense, extremely intense film. But at the end of that film, we give you the punchline that this material is used to create artificial wombs for the hybrids, and that's why it's ongoing.
That is really scary. If you don't mind, we have one caller that called in. Caller, what was your question for our guest, LA, tonight?
My question is, while watching the congressional hearings on the UFO UAP phenomenon, one thing that I saw happen over and over again was military people talking about what they view as a, quote, existential threat. And if I know anything about the government and military and how it works, they have to do that because they need funding. And we've had over $9 trillion in black ops funding that has occurred. And I just wanted your guest's opinion about what's going on with that.
Well, thank you, caller.
It's very complex. There seems to be two factions in government. There's the one faction, the David Grushers, Commander David Fravor, the Nick Popes, the Luis Elizondo, Chris Millen, and others who've come on the record and stated that the phenomenon is real. But then you get Real Admiral Ryder, who comes up and says, nothing to see here. It's all swamp gas reflecting in a weather balloon that's being carted by a flock of geese reflecting the planet Venus. I mean, the same nonsense that we've heard from guys like Philip Glass in the 90s, professional debunkers. So, there seems to be two factions within the government. One wants to put the lid on the thing, put the toothpaste back in the tube. The other guys like Louis Elizondo and Pope and Mellon and everybody else seems to be driving this thing forward. I'll tell you a scenario, and I'm working on my book. It'll be number 14, actually, and it's called The Rungs on the UFO Ladder of Disclosure. The Rungs on the UFO Ladder of Disclosure. And at the end of the book, and understand where I'm going with this, that for the first time since the Cold War, we have a real threat of a nuclear device going off. Because we're all interconnected because of the internet, if you have a nuclear device, a nuclear weapon detonated anywhere on this planet, the entire grid will light up. The entire grid will light up. The human race will experience collectively, the greatest fear in all of human history. We'll all wonder, is this it? Are we next? Are they going to start launching missiles and blow up the whole planet? It'll create the greatest climate of fear. That's when they show up. And this is like, we don't have time to really delve into this. You'll have to have me back. But
yeah, we only have 2 minutes left here.
Yeah.
Again, how can they find your movies? How can they find all your information?
And I get it. The younger generation doesn't want a DVD, and that's fine. A lot of people are streaming. We have a streaming site, streaming.lamarzulli.net, streaming.lamarzulli.net. For less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks, you can educate yourself. And that's what this is. This isn't entertainment. All 10 films are an education in ufology. They are professionally done. We have spent thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours to create this, but we have a different take. We believe that there's a very nefarious agenda. lamarzulli.net, streaming.lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.com. It's all there. Do your homework, folks. Do your homework.
Well, LA, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Again, you gave a whole new theory about what's going on. I'll tell you that. And it does make a lot of sense.
Thank you, sir. It was an honor to be here.
Okay, my friend, you have a great weekend that's coming up, will you?
You too. Take care.
Okay, you take care. Well, JC, who's our guest tomorrow? And what are we going to be talking about?
Well, our guest tomorrow, Gary, leading off is Avi Loeb. He's the Harvard professor who's got a lot of theories on what's going on with some of these UFOs. And he's going to be telling us some of them. And not only that, Gary, but the show starts an hour earlier also.
Yeah, so it starts at 5 p.m. Pacific and at, 8 Eastern.
That's correct. And then, we have Sam Moranto coming back on. He's the one that researched and investigated the O'Hara Chicago Airport UFO case in 2006, which, there's people that seen it and denied it, and it's a crazy case.
But, when it comes down to ufology, it is crazy. But, it's strange what is reported and what isn't reported. I honestly feel whatever is going on, we're not going to ever be told the truth. Again, there's some people, next month, we're going to find out. Or this president is going to divulge what is going on. I don't think that's going to happen because, governments don't tell the truth to the public because they're worried what the public would do. They would lose control of the population if they ever told the population what is going and actually going on, not with ufology, but anything.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. You nailed it on that. There's so much feuding and then disagreements, and then it's mind-boggling, Gary.
It is. By the way, over 2,500 new subscribers on our YouTube channel, all since Sunday night. And I've been doing some interviews on radio stations, well, across the country and over in the Philippines. Well, talking about, ufology, Bigfoot, and all that stuff, and plugging the show in our YouTube channel. So again, you guys out there can just, tell your friends about our show. And don't forget, tomorrow, we're on at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Abby Lowe coming back on. It's going to be interesting what is going on, proving that these things do exist. Again, I want to thank both guests tonight, L.A. and then Captain Paul Watson. I am now going to, after the show, I'm going to tell my son not to go and get fish and chips for me anymore, because who knows, maybe that wasn't even halibut. It could have been a shark.
The odds are probably 80% you were eating shark.
I know. That's really interesting, isn't it? Well, till tomorrow, everybody have a good one. And thank you all for tuning in.
Something I can't find with words. You remind me of what it's like to just